ability to understand speech is amazing. In a matter of milliseconds, we identify sounds, match them to some kind of word that we already have in our memory, and then we use our syntactic knowledge to make meaning of the message that's being spoken to us. It's remarkable. Children can do this, or they learn to do this, in the midst of the typical sounds of a preschool classroom, right? So kids playing with blocks over here, maybe there's some music playing over there for some center, maybe there's a teacher and another child talking behind them, but they can still, with all that sound, still discern speech sounds, connect them to their prior knowledge, and then make meaning out of them. Listening and understanding what is said is a key skill in education. It's what you're doing right now. It's the skill that supports learning by this effective transfer of information from the speaker to the listener. The listener, through listening, can comprehend, retain information, use critical thinking skills, while also promoting empathy, adaptability, and effective communication. It's literally the cornerstone of educational success and lifelong learning. Adult caregivers and early child care providers need to be on the alert for signs that a child is struggling to process auditory information. I've included some information in the description below if you suspect a child is not responding to typical listening activities. So what are typical listening activities? Let me explain in more detail what I mean. I'm going to provide you with a couple of activities as well that you can use at school or at home that support listening to and analyzing sound. Of course, children already know how to listen, but I'm not talking about the passive listening that comes from listening to music or watching a movie and listening to the sound of a TV show. I'm talking about active auditory processing and analysis of language, like listening to directions for an activity, understanding explanations, participating in collaborative conversations with other children in order to solve some kind of problem. I'll give you a few more reasons why listening is an essential skill, and it might start to give you some ideas about what you're doing in an everyday context in order to support listening skills in your classroom or with your child. It allows you to grasp the meaning, the context, and the nuances of information. Listening analytically through auditory processing helps you understand complex ideas. Active listening also helps you with retention. When you focus on what you hear, you're more likely to remember it and recall it later on. Listening well is essential for effective communication. It allows you to respond thoughtfully, ask relevant questions, engage in meaningful discussion. All of these things are essential for collaborative problem solving. Active listening helps you think critically as well. It helps you discern the difference between a fact and an opinion or a bias. It allows you to fully understand the nature of a problem, consider various perspectives, and generate creative solutions. And speaking of considering various perspectives, active listening or auditory processing also helps you develop empathy. Listening goes beyond simply hearing words. It involves understanding emotions and perspectives and the human experience. Developing empathy through listening fosters better relationships and a more inclusive learning environment. Listening to feedback from teachers or mentors or your peers is crucial for personal and academic growth. Constructive feedback, it helps you learn from your mistakes. It creates kind of a self-awareness, and that's how you learn. So if you're working with young children, what are some of the objectives that you should have in mind if you're thinking specifically just about auditory processing with young children? You want to support activities that help children develop a sustained attention span. You want to see how they can follow directions, imitate sounds, identify and associate sounds, use their memory, and follow directions that have first one step and then maybe another step. You also want to help them discriminate between cadence, tempo, and also pitch, sounds that are high and sounds that are low. These are the kind of objectives that help them develop their listening skills, and they should be kind of fun. When teaching children in early childhood, especially if you have bilingual kids in your classroom, you want to observe really closely. You want to see what they're doing, and you want to give tasks that kind of help you evaluate how well they're doing and where they might need more support. So throughout the day, you kind of sprinkle in little activities. Some of them might look like activities that a child needs to respond to their name when it's spoken, repeating nonsense words, imitating sounds of toy animals or other objects in the room, deciding whether a sound is near or far, high or low, soft or loud, same or different. You might have them listen for the sound of different voices in the classroom, like who's talking. You might have them repeat rhyming words. You also might have them follow directions that have one step and then directions that have two steps. Build their stamina for listening. Recall sounds in a sequence. Coordinate their listening skills with their body movements. So a game that has them like, head, shoulders, knees and toes, that kind of thing. Coordinate the physical with the auditory. And if you're thinking specifically about auditory processing, there are a couple of things that you probably want to have in place. You want to build the activity onto something that they already know, so it's not something super new, so you can tell if they're hearing it correctly or if they're just trying to process some kind of new information. You want to create a sense of fun and curiosity, and you also want to make sure that there aren't a lot of distracting sounds around. You yourself, your teacher behaviors or your adult behaviors, you should be enthusiastic, positive, animated. You want to have eye contact. You want to model how to listen by having activities or games where you're listening and speaking and taking turns with the students. You probably already have something in your classroom set up that identifies the rules for listening and speaking or when it's time to listen. You want to focus sometimes on which students are doing that and which students might not quite have caught on to it yet. And one fun game that you might want to try is when the students are all sitting in front of you, maybe it's after story time or it's right before lunchtime or something like that, you can excuse them by using words. So you might say, focus on colors, for example, what the students are wearing that day. You might want to say, okay, listen to my voice, and when you hear a color that you're wearing, you can get up and go to lunch or get up and go to recess or whatever. Everyone who's wearing the color green. And the children check it out, they're wearing green, they take off. And you should feel free to point out to children when they are wearing the color and they themselves don't notice, like if they have green socks on, for example. I've included other activities and some additional resources in the description if you want to go further on this. And I really hope that this was helpful for you. Are you interested in learning more about listening and literacy? If you'd like, subscribe now and you'll automatically get my next video on ears before eyes coming out next week.